Hello and welcome to How to Teach Digital Literacy. This training is designed for tutors and instructors who work with adult learners. My name is Jamie Cobes and I'm a tutor training and digital literacy project manager for Wisconsin Literacy. Just a couple of logistics before we get started with this training. There is a viewing guide that goes along with this training. You may have found a link to it on our website if you found the video there. It is also linked in the description of the video if you found the video on YouTube. You can click on that link and download the viewing guide, and you can type your answers right in it. The viewing guide is also pretty useful because it does have links to outside resources and activities that we'll do during this training. The other way to access those outside resources or activities is if you are watching this video on one device, but you have a smartphone next to you, you can use your smartphone to scan the QR codes that you'll see on the screen. From time to time, I will cue you to pause the video so that you can interact with these activities or write answers in the viewing guide. Let's get started. The objectives for the training are to explain 4 best practices for teaching digital literacy to adult learners, and then to apply those best practices to an example lesson that you'll see in a video at the end of the training. All right, here are the 4 best practices for teaching digital literacy. The first best practice is to pre-assess student needs and goals. You'll notice that this is a best practice of any kind of teaching. So often it sounds like asking a learner, what do you already know? And what do you want to be able to do? Specifically, when we're pre-assessing digital literacy, we'll want to ask questions that get at the what is your digital readiness? When I use the term digital readiness, I mean 3 things. The first is access. Do you have internet, devices, and a support system? The second part of digital readiness is attitude. So we want to know how learners approach new digital situations, how confident they are about a specific situation or technology, and really important, do they feel that digital skills are relevant to their personal goals? The last part of digital readiness is skills. What do you already know, and what do you want to know in terms of technology and digital skills? I'll ask you to pause the video in just a minute so that you can think about and reflect on your own digital readiness. Here is a survey. It is linked on the viewing guide. It is also linked through this QR code, so you can use a smartphone to scan it and you'll be taken right to the survey. The survey is about you and your own digital readiness, but it is completely anonymous. So take a couple minutes to fill that out and then come back to the video. All right, welcome back from that self-assessment. I want to point out that as we're pre-assessing learners, sometimes we get lucky and they explicitly ask for help with digital skills. They say, I want to learn computer skills. But more often than not, learners' goals sound something like, I want to get a better job. I want to enroll in college classes or even get my GED. I want to be able to manage my finances. I want to make a doctor's appointment. And even though they haven't asked for digital skills, it's up to us to realize that digital skills are everywhere in our lives. And so if those are their goals, we need to realize that there are digital skills that will help them achieve those and bring those into our teaching. Here are a few considerations when you think about assessing learners and their digital readiness. The first one is, how will you use the results when you assess? Often we use those results to determine our instruction, what should we teach, and we want to use those results to monitor growth and progress and to demonstrate that growth to our learners to keep them motivated. A second consideration is what language you should use for assessing digital skills. Keep in mind that language skills do not necessarily equal digital skills. So you may have a learner who is just beginning to learn English, but is pretty proficient in digital skills. They may only need to work on the vocabulary of digital technology. Or you could have the opposite. You could have somebody who's highly proficient in English, but is just a beginning digital learner. And so they will need to work on those skills first. A last consideration is to think about where you should start with assessing. In just a minute, I'll show you some examples of assessments that you can use with learners, but you want to keep in mind your learner's persistence and their motivation. If they are just getting started with digital skills, it might be overwhelming or demotivating to take a very long assessment to show their digital skills. I'll ask you to pause right now and answer question 2 on your viewing guide. All right, welcome back from question 2 on your viewing guide. I'd like to go over 3 types of pre-assessments that you can use to pre-assess a learner's digital skills. The first one we'll call an interactive interview. The second one is a survey, either paper or online. And the third type of assessment is an online assessment. So you are on a device such as a computer and you are taking that assessment. I'll show you examples of all 3, and then we'll discuss the pros and cons of using each type. So the first example is an interactive interview. This one comes from North Star, and you can see it's called an interactive pretest. So you will get directions as an instructor or a tutor to set up saving a Word document on the desktop and then turning off the computer. And you'll sit side by side with a learner and then prompt them with these directions here. Is this a desktop or a computer? A desktop computer or a laptop computer? Please point to these things. Please turn the computer on, etc. And then you'll see if I get to the end of this interview, we do have some digital readiness questions. How often do you use computers? What do you want to know? Which areas would you like certification for? Because this comes from North Star, they ask about certification, but I encourage you, if this interactive interview doesn't work for a learner that you're working with, come up with your own questions. The second type of pre-assessment is a survey. This survey, again, comes from North Star, and it is on paper. So you would hand this out to learners, and they would be prompted then to circle the laptop right here on paper to match these computer part names to the pictures. And then you can see again at the end that we have those digital readiness questions. How often do you use a computer? What do you wish you could do but can't? Another example of a paper survey might look like this, a little bit more visual, a little bit simpler of questions. Do you own a smartphone or tablet? Yes or no? Do you own a laptop computer? Yes or no? How frequently do you use them? And then put a check in the box to show if you know how to use each of these skills. Finally, the third type of pre-assessment is an online assessment. So you can see here, I'm using North Star. I'm on my computer and I'm taking the basic computer skills test. It has 38 questions. If I push start,
click on the desktop computer.
I'm prompted to do the action. So I'll click on the desktop computer.
Click on the laptop computer. Click on the touch screen in the picture. Click on the home button in the picture.
So let's talk about the pros and cons of using each type of assessment. That interactive interview where you sit down with a learner and you prompt them to turn on the computer and do other skills, that type of assessment can really help if you have a language barrier. So if a learner is an English learner, you can kind of get over that language barrier by using a lot of charades and pointing gestures, and then you can observe the skill level. This type of assessment is really best for a one-on-one situation. And if you take really good notes during the assessment, you can repeat that interview to measure growth. The survey, whether it is paper or online, requires students to be able to read and to write or type. It does work well as an intake form, and it's good for large groups, so you can assess large numbers of people at the same time. It can serve as a record to determine instructional goals, and it can be used to measure growth, especially in attitude. So if you think about the digital readiness survey that you just took online, it did ask about your confidence in certain skills. So if we ask that question before learning and after learning, we can measure growth in attitude or confidence. Finally, an online assessment. Language can be a barrier, although the North Star assessment that I showed you is also in Spanish. When you use this type of assessment and you pair it with observation, so you watch a learner taking that type of test, it can give you a good sense of their digital readiness. If you'll remember that example that I showed you was 38 question test, so that can be quite overwhelming for digital beginners. You want to keep that in mind. But this type of assessment is excellent for determining instructional goals and measuring growth. Some offer a credential or certificate once you pass the test. And these types of assessments are often paired with corresponding curriculum and practice that you can use as a tutor and instructor, so that's pretty helpful. I'm going to ask you right now to pause the video again and to answer question 3 on your viewing guide. All right, so we just went over best practice number 1, pre-assess. Best practice number 2 is break it down. With this best practice, we want to be able to break a digital skill into manageable steps. Unfortunately, this gets harder to do the more confident that we are with the digital skill. So we want to remember not to take any of those tiny skills that lead up to a larger skill for granted. Breaking it down also involves using plain language, being able to describe a digital skill or a technology in the simplest terms possible without using jargon. For example, when I took the North Star Excel test, I learned that the menu at the top of the screen in Microsoft Excel is actually called the ribbon. This is a word that I never knew, and I can pretty proficiently use Excel without knowing that word. So as a tutor or an instructor, you want to use your gut instinct and decide what is need to know vocabulary and what is just nice to know vocabulary, or even just really complicated jargon that nobody would need to use. You'll also want to decide when to teach relevant vocabulary and when to work on the skill. Often with English learners, you might find that your main goal is teaching that vocabulary first so that they can talk about the digital skill in English. Breaking it down also involves using lots of visuals and manipulatives. And so the manipulatives often just become the technological devices themselves. So we want to make sure that that learning is hands-on. And then finally, breaking it down means reviewing frequently, over and over again. I want to use an example here of breaking it down that I think English teachers often use maybe as a public speaking assignment. They tell learners to explain how to make a peanut butter sandwich. And often learners will start by saying, put the peanut butter on the bread. Okay. But here you've missed so many steps to making a peanut butter sandwich. Do people know how to open the jar of peanut butter, how to open the bag of bread, how to use a knife to spread the peanut butter, etc.? And so that's what we want to think about as we break down digital skills. Are we skipping steps? What do we need to break down so that learners can find success? I'm going to ask you to pause here, look at your viewing guide question number 4, and I want you to think about how to break down this skill. Use email to communicate with employers, doctors, or child's teacher. How would you break that down into very discrete, isolated skills without taking any of the foundational skills required for granted? All right, let's go over some ideas. Let's see if your ideas on your viewing guide match what I have here. So one thing to break the skill down into would be how to set up an account, how to create a password, teaching buttons and icon recognition, like the compose, send, reply, forward, and delete buttons. Teaching about the to, from, and subject lines. Email etiquette. Most emails should start with a greeting and end with a closing and a signature. Reply versus reply all, and CC versus BCC. And avoiding scams. You may have some of these, you may even have more of these, but the idea is we want to break down that skill of using email into smaller skills. The last thing I want to show you about breaking it down is on Wisconsin Literacy's webpage, which you can see is wisconsinliteracy.org. If you go to resources, and then here on the right, digital literacy, and then I'll ask you to scroll down. I want to point out these skill guides that our Wisconsin Health Literacy Division created. So creating strong passwords, email address, connecting to Wi-Fi, installing mobile apps, using QR codes, and finding vaccine records. You'll see that each of these guides is in 5 other languages besides English. And here's an example of what it might look like. So it is just a 2-page guide, 1 page front and back. And on the front, scanning QR codes, you get very simple, concise language. What is a QR code? Are they safe? How do I scan them? And on the back, you get this information reinforced with some visuals. So I point out these guides because part of breaking it down for a learner is giving them some instructions that they can take away with them and continue to practice the skill on their own. And so plain language, visuals, and something to take away is going to help learners review and break down that skill and create a little bit more independence for them. So we just covered best practice number 2, which was break it down. Do you remember best practice number 1? That's right, pre-assess. Now we're moving on to best practice number 3, which is integrate, don't isolate. We want to be able to weave digital skills and vocabulary into all of our instruction. One of the reasons for this is that we show the relevance of digital skills in multiple contexts. We can also use technology to make learning more engaging. And finally, it's a great way to honor students' busy lives. So they might be coming for English language instruction or GED prep or citizenship test prep. And then they might also want to learn computer skills. If we integrate both of those things, they can come once and get all of those skills instead of coming once for English classes and once for computer classes. Now, how to integrate is the challenging question. One approach is to ask yourself, where does digital literacy naturally fit into what I'm teaching? Here you have an ELL example. So where might it fit in the introduction unit, or in the food or shopping unit, in the health unit, in the housing unit, or in the jobs unit? So if you're a visual person, the blue line here is the content that you're teaching. Here, like English language. And then the yellow is the digital skills that we just drop in where they seem to naturally fit. USA Learns is an online English language learning site. It is free and they offer multiple courses. One of them is called Access America. What I'm showing you right now is the Access America course scope and sequence, just as an example of how this approach of where it naturally fits is used. So you can see here, let me grab a pen. You can see here that we have this first unit, exploring a new community. Okay, and we have conversation, we have topics that we'll cover, and then in the third column, we have digital literacy. So in exploring a new community, what naturally fits is how to use public Wi-Fi. So that's a skill that gets plugged into this unit. In Unit 1.2, we have using public transportation. What naturally fits there as far as a digital skill? This curriculum is going to use planning a route with Google Maps. And then a third example, managing your money. What naturally fits in that unit? Online security and keeping your financial information safe. A second approach to integrating digital literacy is to ask, what are the students' digital literacy goals? So if you have a learner who comes with a very clear goal, for example, I want to be able to use email to communicate with my employer, my doctor, or my child's teacher, how can we make progress on this goal in each lesson? So this is a little bit more of a challenging approach to integrating digital literacy, but it's one where the blue is what we're teaching, the main content, so GED prep, English language. The yellow is the digital skill, and then we bring them together in every lesson so that we make sure a learner is making progress in both areas. Here's some examples of other integrated lessons. So if you have a learner who is just learning to read and write in any language, often we start by teaching the alphabet, and you can pre-teach some digital vocabulary by associating digital vocabulary with the alphabet. So C is for computer, M is for mouse. I will recommend here now something called the DART curriculum. The DART curriculum stands for Digital Access and Resilience in Texas. And you can see here on the left, there is one lesson for lowercase alphabet instruction, and then one follow-up lesson for how to find lowercase alphabet on the keyboard, and then uppercase alphabet and uppercase alphabet on the keyboard. So it successfully integrates emerging literacy instruction, the alphabet here in this case, with digital literacy instruction. A second example is a little bit higher level ELL and digital skills. This example comes from the Ventures curriculum. So there's a lesson where learners are learning job vocabulary, and then the grammar does and doesn't. So does she work in a fire station? Yes, she does. No, she doesn't. The digital skill in this example might be that the learner is learning about professional email usernames. So the integration really just becomes a conversation then. Does she have a professional username? Yes, she does. No, she doesn't. And a final example with GED prep, when you take the GED test, being able to read a graph or a chart is an essential skill. So a great way to reinforce that skill is asking learners to create their own graphs and then to analyze and interpret them. I'm going to cue you to pause the video right now and to answer question 5 on your viewing guide. All right, we just covered best practice number 3, which was integrate, don't isolate. Do you remember best practice 2? 2 was break it down, and let's go back to 1. 1 was pre-assess. We are now at the 4th best practice, which is build digital resilience. Digital resilience is an umbrella term for all of these skills or attitudes that you see here in blue. It is having the patience and confidence to approach new technology, the flexibility and adaptability when it doesn't do what you want it to do or when things change and evolve, approaching technology with curiosity and a problem-solving attitude, and having a sense of self-efficacy, so the belief that you have what it takes to achieve your goals. And then ultimately a sense of empowerment, that if you learned one skill or one technology, that can transfer and you can do it again with a different technology. I have an asterisk next to this term digital resilience because sometimes we place a lot of responsibility on our most marginalized communities, and we ask them to be resilient in the face of all sorts of adversity. So you might find that if you're working with a learner and you use the term resilience, they might bristle a little bit at that. They might say, I've been resilient my whole life. So if you know that this is a term that won't sit well with the learner that you're working with, know that digital resilience is also being called digital fluency or technology tenacity. Here's another way to think about digital resilience. There's a lot of parallels between digital resilience and what psychologist Carol Dweck coined fixed mindset and growth mindset. So fixed mindset is the belief that you're born with a certain set of skills or abilities. And when I was young, I had a very fixed mindset about math. I was taught that in order to be good at math, you had to do it quickly and you had to get the right answers all the time. So consequently, I approached math like these emojis on the left. I was fearful, I was intimidated. Growth mindset me as an adult knows that, like this quote says, being good at math is not about how many answers you know, it's how you behave when you don't know. So as an adult, I try to approach math now with a sense of curiosity and problem solving. I can just as easily replace mathematics here with digital resilience. Digital resilience is not about how many answers, apps, or skills you know. It's how you behave when you don't know. There are a few strategies that we can implement as tutors and instructors to build digital resilience, both within ourselves and learners. The first one is to model calm, curiosity, and collaboration. Next, we want to make sure digital learning is always hands-on. We want to teach transfer across contexts and devices. We want to teach problem-solving strategies. And finally, we want to celebrate success, however it shows up. On the right-hand side of the screen now, in this blue box, I have put up some expressions that tutors and instructors can use to make sure that they are using these strategies, but they are scrambled. So I'm going to ask you right now to pause your video, look at question 6 on your viewing guide, and see if you can match the strategy on the left to the appropriate expression on the right. All right, let's check your answers. Model calm, curiosity, and collaboration could sound like this. I don't know all the answers. Let's find out together. This is the beauty, I think, of digital resilience. As tutors and instructors, we often see ourselves as the experts of whatever content we're teaching: English, math, GED prep, social studies, etc. But with technology, it evolves so quickly that we can't always be experts all the time. And so we get to say, I don't know, let's find out together. Make digital learning hands-on could sound like this. Now you try it. Teach transfer across context might sound like this. I wonder if that strategy works here. So for example, I wonder if the copy-paste trick we were using in Microsoft Word also works in email, or maybe it works too on the internet. Teach problem-solving strategies might sound like, where can I go for help? And finally, celebrate success sounds like, remember when you couldn't blank and now you can. Another way I like to celebrate success is to ask the learner, how did you do that? That was great. Can you tell me what you did? And this is a really nice strategy for English learners because it helps them put language around their learning and their process. The last practice that we'll do to think about digital resilience is with this scenario that I'm about to give you. And then you'll answer question 7 on your viewing guide, which asks you, how will you approach this lesson in a way that builds digital resilience for both of you? So what will you do and say for each of these strategies? So the scenario is this. You are a tutor. The learner that you're working with asks for help setting up an email account. You have an email account, but you did not set it up for yourself. You think that your son set it up for you quite a while ago, so you're pretty nervous about teaching somebody else how to set up an account, and you don't want to teach them the wrong steps. Go ahead and reflect on this and answer question 7 in your viewing guide. All right, hopefully you came up with lots of great ideas. I want to mention that if you thought about making digital learning hands-on, ideally you want the learner to set up their own account on their own device. So you should not do what you see in this picture and take the learner's device and do it for them. I also like the idea of celebrating success by sending each other an email. Okay, so we have made it through all 4 best practices for teaching digital literacy. Number 1, pre-assess student needs and goals. Number 2, break it down. Number 3, integrate, don't isolate. And number 4, build digital resilience. We're going to put all of these best practices together by watching a video now of an instructor teaching a digital literacy lesson. As you watch the video, reflect and use question 8 on your viewing guide to write down some of your ideas. Which best practices do you see the instructor using or not using in this lesson?
So shift. Everybody say shift. Shift, good. Caps lock. Tab. What does shift do? What does that key do? Anyone know? Yeah. Yes. You can use it to make a capital letter. How do you do that? Yes, good. You press shift plus the letter A, B, C. Makes it A, B, or C. Can you do anything else with shift? If you're writing your email address, you might use shift. What is this called? Anyone remember in English? What is this called? At. Yeah, so how do you make the at symbol? You use shift. So what do you push?
The shift, then the number 2.
Yes. So you do shift plus 2 gives you at. Good. Tab. Here's, what's this one? Enter. What does enter do?
Next page.
Next page or next line. Most of the time, next line. It only goes to the next page if you're at the bottom of your page. So you're letting the teacher know what is happening with your child and that they cannot come to school today. So where am I going to write this? Am I going to continue up here? No.
Another paragraph.
And another paragraph. So what button do I need to push to get there? Enter. Hello, Mrs. Smith. Enter. I'm going to touch. And then after the comma, we're going to push. What key will we push to get down to the next line? Enter. So hello, Mrs. Smith, comma, and then push the enter key to get to the next line. Enter. Thanks for being a great teacher. My son has a fever and can't come to school today. What else do I need to tell my son's teacher? What about homework? Your son is going to be out of school all day. He's going to miss a lot. What do you need to do as a parent to make sure that your kid isn't behind the next day?
You kind of think about the means of us sending you the class, the homework.
Yes. Please send me. Okay, did you see that? What happened? Let's watch again. So please send me. Me was at the edge. Is at the end of the space where I can type. I didn't push enter.
But it came down itself.
It came down all by itself. Okay? Where is, if you make a mistake, what do we do?
Either you delete or press the backspace bar.
Where is backspace? Top or bottom? Top or bottom?
Top.
Top. Is it on the right or on the left?
On the right.
Yes, top right, there's backspace.
And enter.
Enter, good. So everybody push enter if you're there. And then type a closing. Choose whichever one you want. Yes, good. The red lines mean there's a mistake. So on mine, are the period and the S touching? Good. See how there's red lines under this? What is that telling me? Saying, ooh, there's a mistake right there. Fix something before you finish. Okay, so what is the mistake I made right here? Yes, exactly. I'm gonna bring my cursor and put it there, and then it's even making a suggestion for me. It's saying, oh, maybe you forgot a space. Mrs. Smith. Great.
Okay, so some of the things that you may have noticed in that video, I will start from number 4, building digital resilience. All of the students in that class had access to their own computers, so that learning definitely was hands-on. The instructor also talked about transfer of skills to different contexts and different devices. One example of that was when she talked about the shift key. You can use shift to make capital letters, but you can also use shift when you're typing an email for the @ symbol. She also did a great job of teaching problem solving. So she talked about where to find the backspace button if you make a mistake, and what the red lines mean for the autocorrect feature in the Microsoft Word. Hopefully you could see that she used best practice number 3, integrate, don't isolate, because in addition to a digital skill lesson about buttons you'd find on the keyboard, this was an English language lesson that involved some cultural and some communication objectives. It was about writing and communicating to a teacher about a sick child, and the cultural idea of asking for homework so that the child didn't get too far behind. All of that integrated with how to type. Best practice number 2, break it down. I hope that you could hear. I think that she used some pretty simplified language. She also broke down this idea. She didn't just say, let's write an email to the teacher. She really thought about which buttons are my students going to need to learn in order to type that letter, like the enter button after the greeting, dear Mrs. Smith, comma, then you have to push enter. Finally, best practice number 1, I would say that that's probably the practice that we did not see too much of in this video, but we can assume that the instructor did pre-assess her students' needs and goals. What did they want to learn, and are they ready for this typing lesson? I want to thank you very much for participating in this training. The last question on your viewing guide is a course evaluation, question number 9. There's a link. We would really appreciate hearing your feedback about this course. You can also get to the evaluation by scanning the QR code on the left side of your screen. The QR code on the right side of your screen is if you're interested in any more trainings from Wisconsin Literacy. You can access our tutor training page by scanning that code or by entering this shortened bit.ly link into your internet browser. Thank you so much.